everyone. Welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk. This week, I am Elyse. I am a medium and channel with Avalon Spirit, joined by the lovely Ginette, and we're missing our third counterpart, Lisa. Sending her lots of love. This week, well, we've been talking a little bit about what are we going to talk about? It's been a lot. There's been a lot going on, and we've been finding Spirit's been a little bit quieter. Like they'll show up in ways that they can. But it feels like there's a lot going on behind the scenes and we're not privy to it. And so we were kind of having this conversation about what do we do in these moments where we feel like we're cut off? Because if we're talking about, conscious evolution of society and we're all evolving how we want to and to a degree, right? Everybody's different and how that shows up. But as we're constantly kind of feeling this pull towards spirit and to connecting into spirit, we kind of get into that groove, and then all of a sudden the taps turn off and you're like, what do I do? You kind of, yeah, it's like ding dong. Hello. You kind of feel a little bit overwhelmed or lost or confused, or is it about me, or am I doing something wrong, or how do I make this decision, or what do I do? I was trying to follow guidance and now I feel like I'm not getting any. How does that work? So curious what you do in those moments, because I guess it's fair to say too, they happen collectively all the time, and they happen in our individual journeys too, all the time, for some very purposeful reasons sometimes.
Yeah, it's very cyclical. I find that ebb and flow that we talk about, information comes in and then it has to flow out for a little bit so we can adjust and, adjust in the many ways, whether it be our body needs to adjust to the frequency, our mind needs to adjust to the new conscious information, and we have to try and figure out where does this fit in my reality. But what I have learned, and I know we've talked about this, but what I've learned in the moments when they're silent, first of all, is to not get caught up in wasting time worrying that I can't do this anymore. I'm not connected. I suck. I am not worthy. I am not, whatever the words are. That is a waste of time, because it is not that, right? It is not that we can't connect in. When we continually try to connect in and nothing happens, there's a reason why there's that disconnect, for whatever reason. And so what I've really found has been one of the best ways to support myself in that time is to remember that I am a co-creator with spirit, right? Like you were kind of mentioning, sometimes we get so caught up in always going and turning to spirit, turning to guides, angels, whatever that may be, for guidance. We almost can form a codependency sometimes on them of being like, well, how do I take the next step? And they're like, put your foot down
How do
and
you
then pick
walk?
up the next one,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes we can get that dependent on them.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes it's good to reflect on, if you notice you're getting that dependent where you're turning to them for every single thing, they will often pull away because they're wanting you to stand on your own two feet again.
Mhm.
But another thing to recognize is, if that's not the case, sometimes when they pull back is a beautiful opportunity for you, me, us to really sit in our own intuition and make choices.
Mhm.
And I was reminded of this today. Spirit was saying, they're like, if you make a choice that is totally not set for you, like is not the right thing for your soul's journey, we'll divert it.
Mhm.
Even if we're quiet, we'll divert it. We'll have something happen to divert your path. So make a choice for yourself. And if it is way out there and ridiculous, we'll divert it.
Mhm.
Right. And I was like, that's so true. And so I like that we're talking about this today, because they were so bold in sharing that,
Mhm.
probably because they knew we would eventually figure out that we were going to talk about this today, right?
Sure.
But it's really an opportunity to get back in touch with self and decide, as an equal partner, like, what do I want to do in this situation? If I'm not getting counsel based on everything that I know right now, what do I want to do moving forward? What feels right to me?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I had an experience. I mean, I think we've all can think of multiple experiences we've had where that's happened. But for me, I know one that just came to mind as you were speaking was years ago. It was I was kind of in one career path that I just had gone to university for. It didn't feel aligned. I felt really it was kind of venturing into my spiritual journey, but not fully in there, trying to figure out what am I supposed to do in this world? I feel like what I'm doing is not it. And I started kind of looking into other things, and I thought, I want to help people. I'm going to become a social worker. And I was like, this is the thing. I'm going to become a social worker. I'm going to upgrade some courses, apply to all the classes, apply to all the schools rather. And I try and be a very organized person. And I was like, I had all my ducks in a row. There was lots of different things that I needed to apply to all these different programs. Not one of them accepted me. And the ones that I had, some of them it was like, oh, you were not accepted because you didn't meet the competitive average that was extra high or whatever. But the ones that I did meet the average, I like forgot to send a document or something happened or I like missed the deadline by a day that I thought for sure I was good on. And like all these things to the point where like not one program accepted me. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is not the thing for me because I was for sure set on this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm supposed to go. And all of it's going to work out. And it felt like, I had everything kind of taken care of and I just didn't work out. So in that moment, it's like, okay, regroup. Where am I going now? What's that next right step? And that kind of leads me to my other thought around, I think sometimes as humans, it's hard when we live in a world that is very forward focused, that's very planned and figure your life out and, have all of these things set and figured out and sorted through. And yes, we need to have a degree of that to exist in the world and the reality that we're currently in. And I think that that's miscited or misguided rather. And a lot of people talk about how, really the only thing that's real is the present. And so we get so caught up in what's going to happen? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? I need to figure it out and plan it all out and know what's happening. So there's no uncertainty. And like the reality is that's just not real. Even if we think we are fully planned out, there's always uncertainty. And two, sometimes I think spirit wants us to just be like, pump the brakes a little bit. Like, be here now. It's not just about where you're going. You're also alive right now in this moment of trying to think about what you want for your future. You're like bypassing the present moment and the present experience. So I think sometimes they'll scale back a little bit because I'm a planner and I like to be organized and I like to know what's happening. I'm a very like intuitive, airy fairy person on my Pisces side of me, but my Libra side is like, okay, let's get things balanced and organized and like move through life. And that just doesn't work a lot of the time. I plan things and they fall apart. So all to say, I just think that, sometimes spirit will really rein us in. Oh, 555. And we were talking too about numbers are not so today. But yeah, I just think that there's multiple reasons, as you were saying, as to why this happens, whether it's like a collective thing or an individual journey thing.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think for like tangible things to bring it back to kind of disengage from the constant seeking from spirit and that dependency. And there's not a shame or a judgment in that seeking for guidance because it is comforting, right? Like it is so comforting when we get a message from spirit and then an alignment and, we feel we're in the flow. But I think what helps to disengage that sometimes when you feel like you're knocking and they're not there is to start making really small choices for you. And that could be something as small as if you're feeling frustrated with spirit and you're like, I can't tune into anything. It's like, okay, well, what can I control in my narrative right now and make a choice? And that could be as simple as, what do you really want for dinner? Start there. Not what do you have? What would you like to choose to have for dinner, right? Or what, if you want to take charge of something, maybe you change the wall color in your living room, right? Like you do something for you that you have authority over to choose something. And what that does is that choice piece brings you back to present moment, like you were talking about, and then allows you to tune into your own feel. And the fact that you followed on your own feel then like expands or blossoms your sense of intuition and self. And I find that really like brings you right back to center. And then from there, you can kind of disengage more from spirit, being like, okay, I realize you're on vacation or you're busy doing something. I got it covered here because you've reconnected into choosing for you. So I find that really helpful. Like it can be many different things, but like something 3D and something tangible that you can do and act on in that day, right? Like at that moment, if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I think that helps us like ground a little bit into, because it's like that perpetual conversation of like, we're consciously evolving and connecting more to spirit and growing that side of ourselves or relearning and remembering that side of ourselves. But we're also here to be humans. We're not here to be spirit. We're here to be humans. So we have to be kind of, I think, in constant search of that balance of what that looks like. And even if we are, so, as you were saying, you can make those 3D kind of like easy next right step choices. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? What feels good for me right in this moment? Even if you're talking about bigger things that maybe you want that spirit guidance on eventually, or maybe you got spirit guidance on it and now you kind of feel high and dry in the middle of the process, and now you're like, hey, what now? I kind of find myself in that situation presently right now anyways, or as well. And with that, I think it's important to remember that, like, while you might feel disconnected or like nobody's home from the broader spirit collective, you always have your own spirit. You always are in communication with the part of you, the conscious part of you that is spirit. That is never gone, right? So when we talk about like feeling into our own intuition, you're still connecting to spirit. It's just yours. It's your soul self. It's the part of you that was like, hey, I'm going to hop down here into this meat suit and experience life. That is always still connected in. So when we talk, sometimes I think we talk about like, oh, when we are talking to spirit, it's like, well, who are you talking to? Right? It can be our guides. It can be, other spirits, maybe our loved ones that have crossed, whatever. But oftentimes it's not our own intuitive higher self or spirit self aspect. It's our, the things that are removed from us. And we could go down a tangent of nothing is removed and it's all connected. But for simplicity's sake, the reminder of, we always have our own spirit because we're alive, we're here. Our spirit is in our body, is within us, is everywhere, is everything. So we can always connect back to that. And if you are feeling like, oh, I feel lost, or I just don't know what to do, or I do need some guidance, remembering that it's not just about the outward spirits, but it's also our own. Because they might not, our own intuition and our own spirit self might not be like, hey, heads up, this is what, the spirit collective is doing, and these are all the things that are going to happen. But it might say, you know what, I've got an ear to the ground, and here's the next right step for you, based on what we know from before, and based on what we know you desire, or what I, as a spirit self, desire for this lifetime. And so it's that, and I think that's where like connecting back to your body is another great way, asking. I'm a big proponent of like, how does this option feel in my body? Does it feel like if I sit and get quiet and I take a breath and I decide like, okay, I'm going to do A, does it feel expansive? Do I feel a glowing? Do I feel a smile come across my face? Like whatever that is for you. Or do I feel like, oh, that doesn't feel good. It feels restrictive. I want to like move my body in a kind of cowering way, or whatever. We can ask ourselves that and get that response without having to really like think or logic it, because I think it gets hard, or it can be tricky to differentiate between our brain and what our spirit is saying. So that's why sometimes I think it's easier for us to just be like, hey guides, hey spirit that's like not connected to us or not us, tell me what's up. Because it can feel a little more concrete sometimes than when it's your own internal intuition and dialogue, because it all sounds the same in our brain, right? So that's where I like to go to the body, ask the body, and that can look a million different ways. That can, whatever resonates for you. Maybe you go on a walk and you feel into it that way, or you imagine dropping your consciousness into your heart space or your body and ask your body, what does it want in this moment? What feels like the next right step? And going about it that way, because ultimately that's where our spirit lives, right, is in our body. So I think that's another way that we can tap in without going too far outside of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I was just thinking too, for people that are very left-brained or have a very busy brain, like a very analytical thinking brain, and they're like, well, how do I feel into my body? How do I do that when I'm thinking? Another thing sometimes people can do is even like writing a list of 2 columns, and you satisfy the left brain first. So you let your brain tell you what it thinks first, right? So you make your list of all the things you think you should do or could do, whatever. Be very analytical and logical about it. Make that list. And like, let that left brain have its say first and foremost. And then when you've exhausted that list, completely filled it out, you then say, thank you. Now I'm going to get into the feel, right? What do I feel I would like to do? And then you, the whole person, the whole being, can look at the list of brain and heart, or brain and body, and then be like, hey, what would I like to do? Right? Bring it back to the 3D person of what would you like to do? Of the list that your brain created and your spirit created, what would you like to choose and do?
Mhm.
Right? I think it's just different ways people can find that connection back into it, depending on which angle you go to. I know I right away like to go to feel right away, but I know some people are so analytical that like they can't get to feel until brain has been able to have its own time to, run the show for a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people where I very much I struggle internally with like my logical, rational self that like wants to figure everything out and learn and know and have control. And then like the very intuitive, watery part of myself that is like feeling and emotions and like, I know this is the right thing to do, but it doesn't feel right. Or it's the thing I should do, but it doesn't feel right. And so um, that can be a confusing experience. So I like that idea of I'm somebody that needs to get things out of my head because they just bounce around and bounce around and bounce around. And oftentimes, even it could just be like sending you a voice note, hey, Ginette, here's all these things that I'm like frustrated with right now and overwhelmed with and nothing to do or say, just getting it out to like
Sorry.
press it
Yeah.
so that I cannot let it bounce around so much in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of bring that together is I think this period right now where maybe a lot of people are feeling kind of shut out a little bit or they can't access it in, we are stepping into an energy, a really fiery energy, not from, I mean, some of the planets are in Aries right now, but um, a high momentum, fast energy of change. I know in all the daily card readings I've been doing this week, there's been a ton of wands, so fiery energy, and the cards that really indicate momentum. So for some people, they may feel like spirit's really quiet, but lots of things are happening. At that point, tune into self, right? If you feel like spirit's really quiet and nothing's happening, at that point, tune into self. And the message in that is that no matter what's going on, you are always your safe space too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're always connected to spirit, but you're also always your own safe space. So in a way, this is kind of giving everybody an opportunity now to go into that same or safe space,
Mm-hmm.
right? That space of like independent self too.
Yeah. And this kind of brings to mind an important point that I was having a conversation with a client a few days ago, and they were kind of speaking about as if spirit and the idea of source is perfection, and that we always have to do what they say or what they nudge us towards because they know best because it's perfection, right? Whereas like we're flawed humans living in a flawed world. And yes, and I can see where that comes from in the sense of like perfection and love, and it's all this like divinity, but it's not, I don't feel in the way that we would label perfection, or that we would, I think it's so much broader and way less linear than what we would say as this is a perfect thing, right? I just don't believe that perfection exists
Mm-hmm.
in the way that we describe it. And it's the reminder of like, and I know we've had this conversation sometimes with spirit, we're like, yo, do you remember what it's like to live on this planet? Because
Yeah.
I gotta pay my bills, or I gotta, like I have a mortgage. I can't just be like, no, I'm good, and not pay it 1 month. Like, and not to say that they're saying don't do that, but
Yeah.
sometimes it can feel like maybe it's a little bit like the ask or the thing that we're being drawn towards or the intuition that we're having feels like I don't know how I can do that, or that doesn't make sense right now, or like this is going to be really challenging and cause a lot of stress for me that I just don't have the capacity for. We always have sovereignty over what we choose for our life and where we want to go and what we want to do. And so we can see, we can look at spirit guidance and intuition as like, oh, well, they must know best because they're spirit. And, what do we know? And also, we're living our life, right? Not them. So there's always that, what is my choice at the end of the day? They can give us all the guidance in the world. We always have the right to choose or not choose. And if we choose to not listen to that in this moment, then that's okay. And they're always going to, even if we're choosing wrong from their perspective, they're always going to give us that autonomy to experience whatever we're trying to experience in that moment, and also try and rearrange things to ensure that we're still moving in the direction that we chose when we first came onto this planet. Um,
So true. They say that so often in readings. They say just because, like, say there's a message that they bring through me to the person for somebody else, they always tell me to remind the person who's getting the reading, you do not have to pass this message on if you're not comfortable. Just because you're given it, it doesn't mean you have to. There are other ways. So although Spirit even gives a message, they're saying use your free will and choose for you what you're going to do with this. Always. Right? And I think that's like a hallmark of the free will idea on our planet, that they will honor in both ways. Right? So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well then.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious to see what kind of unfolds for everybody this weekend as we feel into this energy of shift and change. And
A big moon.
What's that?
There's a big moon this weekend.
Yes, that's
Eclipse.
right. And eclipse, it's a full lunar eclipse on the 15th, 16th, depending where you are. And I just have to give this visual because I keep staring at this. This is like what Spirit is up to. This is a magician card right now, but like this is the spirit world and destiny, but within that is also your ability to create. So I wish I had two of these cards side by side. Actually, that's funny. They're like, use the other one. Okay. Consider this. Okay. This is like your cup. This is Spirit's cup. The two of you are co-creating this whirliness. Like this would be one cup's worth together. So just as much as Spirit is creating, so are you creating in equal parts represented in this cup. So just something to ponder and consider when you're moving through the weekend and through these changes and all that kind of stuff. You are equal parts creator. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and it's a new moon lunar eclipse, right?
Full moon.
Full moon lunar eclipse, right?
Full moon, yeah.
So it might be intense, but remembering that you have that safe space within you, right? So if we're feeling a lot, if we're not getting much information, but you're feeling all the feels, doing what you can to take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you are wanting to deepen your own journey into spirit and consciousness, check out avalonspirit.com. We are on there as well as several other really skilled and loving personal journey guides to help you on your path as well. So check that out. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and share and like this video, and we sure do appreciate you. So we will see you guys next week.
Bye.